Hi, I'm Paul Duchesne. Welcome to Mama Paul's Video Podcast. Today's show is going to be Chapter 3 on Timothy Snyder's book on tyranny. So I've got it up above me right over here, and let's get a little bit of a closer look over there with the overhead shot in. And this is a graphic edition. Edition of Timothy Snyder's book, and the original one was sort of a quick read pocket guide. And it's been turned into a absolutely visually striking rumination by collaboration with Nora Krug, who's done a few other visually striking graphic novels. And it's really uplifted the whole book here and made it way more impactful. Way more impactful is the way I'm seeing it. So let's take this down over here and put up the first few pages, and we're going to get over here, and the book opens pretty much on pages 2. The chapter opens rather on chapters pages 2 and 3 with an interesting quote by. What has been attributed to Thomas Jefferson, but isn't from Thomas Jefferson. Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. And that's how the page opens up. And it wasn't Thomas Jefferson that said it. And I reconfirmed this. I researched this a little bit. And apparently it was the American abolitionist, a guy named Wendell Phillips, back in 1852, who said this while he was delivering a speech in Massachusetts to an anti-slavery society. So you'll notice the graphic image takes you from his quote, which is running across that's the red line, the quote's running across the red line, over to the two young slave boys. They look like they're about teenagers, mid-teenagers over there on the right side of the page. So anyway, Wendell Phillips did in fact say this, and this has been well documented in the speech. In fact, I looked up the whole speech. So what we're talking about here, do you see the picture there on the left side of the page, where the guy's looking out with binoculars in one picture, and he's looking in a mirror in the other image. And we see ourselves as a city on the hill, a stronghold of democracy. And it's interesting, I saw that City on the Hill reference, and I thought, I vaguely remember that from Roman history, and I thought we were talking about the founding of Rome, and that was the connection. But it turns out the City on the Hill is out of it's from the Sermon on the Mount. It's from Christ's Sermon on the Mount. And in the 20th century, it's been used quite a few times. Kennedy used it, Reagan used it, even recently, Ted Cruz has used the term. I believe there's a TV show and there's a record out all about City on the Hill. That America has been a beacon of hope. And that's sort of the implication of it. We have been a beacon of hope. And we've been looking outside ourselves as who is going to try to affect that democracy that we put out here from the American democracy, which I am rather critical of to start with. But we have been looking for the threats from abroad, and there are threats from abroad for sure. Putin is definitely attempting to dismantle democracies and discredit democracies all throughout Europe and the Americas and anywhere he can. But the main threat is coming from here. Human nature is such that American democracy must be defended from Americans who would exploit its freedom to bring about its end. American democracy must be defended from Americans who would exploit its freedom to bring about its end. And the Americans that we can look at, right on television every other night would be the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the QAnon people who are the coming together of these different groups is just absolutely remarkable. But you literally have Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, QAnon people, along with your usual run of Ku Klux Klanners and your reinvigorated fascists who now have more and more little Hitler signs and flags and uniforms and everything. So this whole authoritarian group is rearing its ugly head, and they are more of a threat to us internally than Putin is from the external. At the bottom of the page there on the left, the quote he has is, we've added that, a quote, the manna of popular liberty must be gathered each day or it is rotten. Must be gathered each day or it is rotten. And Tom Hartman, who has he's a progressive talk show host. He has his own show. My wife has a subscription to it. He used to be on Air America. Now he's been reduced to subscriptions. I'm not sure where he is on the dial. I don't think he is on the dial anymore. You have to get on the internet. Tom Hartman, Thom, an H with a Tom. And he closed the show with a little statement that democracy is not a spectator sport. Get out, get active, tag, you're it. Democracy is not a spectator sport. All right, so let's move on from there and get over to page 3-4. And we could put it up here, and this would be the one with the Nazi symbols. There it is. There it is. Let me put it in the middle and give it on the full screen for a moment. And he starts off by saying that the 20th century has attempted to extend the franchise of durable democracies. Yet, the democracies that arose after the First and Second World War often collapsed when a single party seized power. When a single party seized power, these democracies that came about after the First World War, after the Second World War, and you had in Germany, you had the Nazi Party in Germany, which in 1933 gained power and stayed in power until the end of World War II, 1945. You had the communists. You had the communist single party in 1946. And they were in Czechoslovakia, and they stayed in power right up till the Berlin Wall came down in 1989. And more recently, we have the rise of Putin's party in Russia in 1990, and since then there has not been a legitimate election. Not that there was much before that, but there was a little bit more than you have with Putin. And Putin, the authoritarian strongman, has totally taken over the electoral process in Russia, and he's still in power today. And the one that's not mentioned in the book is Xi Jinping in China, who also is quite autocratic, to say the least, and manipulating and moving things every other day to ensure that he stays in as long as possible. On the page there, you've got the three hand signs, the fascist sign, the Nazi sign, and the communist sign. And what they're talking about is the elections in the 30s and 40s were followed by a combination of spectacle, repression, and tactics slicing off layers of opposition. They call them salami tactics, slicing off layers of opposition one by one. And in a sense, you can sort of see that happening here today in the country with the gun laws, with the abortion laws, with the complete dissing of this attempt to get the elections straightened out here. The Republican Party just absolutely voting against democratic elections. And the picture at the bottom of the Germans here, and these were some that were in prison, said most people were distracted, some were imprisoned, and some were outnumbered. Well, distracted, I'm distracted. Most of you are distracted. Mostly all of us are distracted. Me, I am very much taken with certain aspects of watching entertaining television every night. So I'm distracted. I put time into this, but I'm definitely distracted. Some were imprisoned in terms of we could just go right off the bat with the black community, which has been imprisoned at 3 times the rate of the white community. And this has been going on ever since the Equal Rights Amendment was passed back in the 60s. There's been a uber imprisonment of the black male population specifically, and others were outmatched. He says they're outmatched. These oath keepers, these Proud Boys, these Nazis, these Klansmen, they run around with guns all over the place, and all they keep talking about is that there's a civil war coming. They're the civil war. and they're running around with this gun. They're trying to get everybody else to sort of go along with, oh, we're having a civil war, so then we can get these the good guys armed, the bad guys armed, and then we will have a civil war. The opposite side of the page looks like a Valentine card, and in a sense it sort of is. And he starts off by talking about how I don't know who the author is. David Lodge has a novel where he says, "You don't know you made love for the last time, that you are making love for the last time." And he equates that to voting. You don't know you voted for the last time until you voted for the last time. And that's where he's using these references to the Germans in the 30s and the communists in the 40s and Putin currently and Xi Jinping currently. The Russians who voted in 1990 didn't think that this would be the last free and fair election. If you just follow the last couple of years here, with Putin running around poisoning people, having planes taken down from the sky so they can pull people off and put them in prisons, and when the election did happen, massive suppression of anybody that opposed them. Same thing's going on in Myanmar, other places, all these autocratic instances around the whole planet here. And he says that the Russian oligarchy was established in 1990 elections, continues to function and promote a foreign policy designed to destroy democracy elsewhere. It's a stated policy of Putin and his whole gang to destroy democracies everywhere they can, and they've been very actively doing that, attempting to do that throughout Europe, throughout the Americas, and right now today with this ridiculous convoy of truck drivers, supposed anti-vax truck drivers. Now the anti-vaxxers within the trucking industry there, over 80% of the drivers are vaccinated, as is over 80% of the people in Ottawa and these other spots there. They're acting as if they are 50% of the people and everybody's running around having this big revolution. It's not. It's a small group of people, and there's definitely a domestic and an international connection to this that goes beyond a few truckers getting together in the lunchroom and deciding to have a demonstration like this. Literally, the QAnon people are all over this thing. The Oath Keepers, the same group of people, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the KKK people, the fascists, the Nazi groups, and the QAnons are all, this is an international cabal, which is why you see similar things happening in New Zealand, in France. They're attempting to, they're claiming they're going to come after the Super Bowl game. That would be interesting, going down and disrupting the Super Bowl game in Los Angeles. We'll see how that goes. So anyway, we're definitely getting into a uber confrontational period, no doubt about it. Okay, let's move on to the next page here, and this is the last of the series. And interesting. It's funny the way his pages, one side is way more visually stimulating and threatening looking, where the right-hand side of the page in most cases has been real placid looking. We have a picture of cherry blossoms in Washington on the right side there. But over on the left here we have these little statues, these little sort of Roman and Greek type statues. And what they say here is, what it says here, the logic of the system they devised was to mitigate the consequences of our real imperfections, not to celebrate our imaginary perfections. The logic of the system was to mitigate the consequences of our imperfections, not celebrate our perfections. And the imperfections would be the hatred, greed, and violence, which appears to be the dominant factors that we deal with every day, coming out of a lot of places. If you read the newspapers, you see it. It's more than just in the newspaper. It's on the street. It's weird things going on. And there's when Trump got into office, there was always this undercurrent running throughout the society. But when Trump got in, he celebrated it. At his rallies, he would encourage people to throw people out, to beat people up. He would encourage the violence. So this guy is a spokesman for the hatred, greed, and violence that's dominating the end days of this society that we're in right now. Peaceful cooperation, egalitarianism, and nonviolence are not at the top of the list here. But those are the elements that are going to keep us strong. Those are what are ultimately going to win out in the long run. Our peaceful cooperation, our egalitarianism, and the non-violence. That is what will win in the long run. Everything else cannot win because it's just suicidal. There's no way about it. There's no different way about it. At the bottom of the page there with the statues, he says the oligarchy are even more threatened as globalization increases differences in wealth. And I'm going to just pull this old book out from the side for a second here. This was the Capital in the 21st Century by Thomas Piketty, the French political economist, the most popular political economy book probably in the last 50 years. And I really got heavily into this when it came out, and there's a movie about it too. They made a movie. I actually wrote a presentation for a play about the book, presented it to Piketty, but it was a little bit too esoteric. I may talk about it another day. It was pretty esoteric, sort of a love story kind of a thing between economists. But in this book, Piketty, the thrust of it was that the rate of return on capital is always greater than the rate of return on labor. The rate of return on capital is greater than the rate of return on labor, R greater than G. So anybody working for a living is never going to get even near the wealth of the guy that's sitting there by the pool collecting dividends on his stocks that the pariahs in Wall Street are generating for him. The globalization has increased these differences because with globalization, money got globalized. The multinationals got globalized, the power got globalized, but the unions never globalized. And this goes back to big mistakes that were made long time ago, back in the 70s when I was at AT&T. I watched the AFL-CIO and the rest of the American unions turn down offers from the European unions to work together. The American unions felt like we're on top of things. We know what we're doing. We don't need to cooperate with anybody else. Big mistake. Big mistake. Now we have a world dominated by money. You've got land, labor, and capital, your three main elements of your economic systems, and labor is definitely not on par. If it's a three-sided stool, you're going to fall over. You're going to fall over into the wealth is what's going to happen. So let's wrap this up here in a minute here. The odd American idea, this was remarkable when I read this, that he put it this way, the odd American idea that giving money to political campaigns is free speech. That the very rich have, obviously, more free speech than you and I have. So the more money you have, the more free speech you have. This was Citizens United. This whole thing, this was the nail in the coffin of this wobbling democracy. More free speech, obviously more voting power, more influence politically. We've gotten to the point today where we're supposed to have this check and balance system, which you study in high school, and some people even in college even study that. But we've rarely faced a situation like the present when the less popular of the two parties suppresses voting, claims fraud when it loses an election. They even claim fraud before they lose the election because they know they're going to lose the election. Trump was claiming fraud more than when he first got in, he was stating that there was going to be a rigged election. And in the beginning of the summer before the election, 2020, he was publicly talking about the rigged election coming up. And they control the majority of the state houses. So what needs to be done is we need to fix the gerrymandering so that we have an equal vote, and the vote can be simply counted, and we have a paper ballot that can always be recounted. That's what saved part of the overthrow of these phony electors in Wisconsin, the fact that they did have the paper ballot. They were trying to get a hold of the machines, these phony electors, these fake electors, in Michigan, Georgia, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona. and then a little bit Pennsylvania, New Mexico. They were trying to get a hold of these machines with this basically a conspiracy running out of the White House and Giuliani and the rest of these Goomba gangsters. And they wanted to get their whole hands on the voting machines so that they could then claim that the software was being influenced from China or Venezuela or God knows where. I mean, these people are... Any test, any future election will be a test of the American tradition. So I'm going to run over and just put a little paper here. I mentioned it earlier. Let me put it to the side there. And we'll take down the chapter. Okay. Get out there, get active, tag, you're it. This was Tom Hartman's rap. I mentioned it a little earlier. Democracy is not a spectator sport. Get out there, get active, tag, you're it. See you next time for Chapter 4, Peace, Patience, and Persistence.